Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Thameslink and Great Northern Stakeholder Forum. As you know, we originally were intending to meet face-to-face at Old Street, but unfortunately, due to the extreme weather on some parts of our network, we've decided to run this as a webinar session instead. So thank you for those that have dialed in with us this evening. We know that many of our stakeholders hold full-time jobs or have other commitments that mean they cannot easily attend face-to-face meetings. Therefore, we are actually organising a series of webinars over the next 12 months using Skype Meeting Broadcast, which is the software system that you're currently using now. This system will allow us to schedule, produce and broadcast meetings or events online. Skype does allow us to broadcast a presentation, show a manager speaking to you now, as I am, and hold an online Q&A with stakeholders whilst you're sat at their very own comfort in your own home or in the office. The broadcast of this webinar will also be recorded and will be uploaded to the Stakeholder extranet, where you'll be able to watch it back at your convenience. This will be able to show the full presentation, the audio visual of the presenter, and also the live Q&A. This does not mean that we'll be stopping face-to-face meetings, so we'll be holding our usual forums that we hold 4 times a year, additionally the annual conference that takes place in the summer. For the time being, we'll be making sure that all content is covered in both face-to-face meetings and via the webinars, so you can choose how you receive updates from us. So today's session will include a route update from Stuart Cheshire, Passenger Service Director for Thameslink and Great Northern, and then Phil Hutchinson will give an update on the outcome of the 2018 timetable consultation. We will then open to the floor for a Q&A session. So the agenda for today is a quick update from myself around stakeholder communications, handing over to Stuart. We will then open the floor to a general Q&A on BAU, so business as usual, so anything to do with route performance, etc. We will then hand over to Phil Hutchinson, and then we will do a Q&A specifically on the timetable presentation, and then we will close afterwards. The original timings for this session was due to finish at around 19:15, so we will crack on and see how we get on and aim to finish about then as well, depending on how many questions we have from the floor. So just some hints and tips for during the session. If you log on and assign your name so that we can see who's answering questions, that would be really great. You need to scroll down below to see the type box where you can ask questions throughout the presentations. We will then answer all of these as part for everybody to see during the Q&A part of the agenda. And if also, if you click the all button on the left hand side of the type box, you'll be able to see all the questions asked by other people that are taking part in this session. So on your screen now there is a list of the different channels that we use to engage with you as our stakeholders, our programme of activities. So on the top left there you will see our webinar series, which I've just discussed. So we'll be sending out some more information about that in the next couple of weeks. So this will be 12 topics over the next 12 months, where you'll be able to register your interest in advance, and we'll send out a link and more information closer to the time. These will be led by an appropriate member of the management team internally, whether that's head of retail, head of timetable, etc., and the stakeholder team will help manage that. Just to the right hand side, you'll see we've got our stakeholder extranet inside track that some of you are familiar with. I know that there is a problem around some of the passwords. We are looking into this and we'll probably set up a standard password for everybody to use. Again, we will send out an update about this in due course. The monthly newsletter In Touch, which many of you receive. In addition to this, we've also introduced the quarterly newsletters, which gives you a bit more of a in-depth roundup specifically to the different routes. So one for Great Northern, one for Thameslink, one for Southern as well. We have our quarterly forums, our annual stakeholder conference, day-to-day points of contact with the team. So there's myself, Andy Harrowell, who is our CSR manager, Yvonne Leslie, who many of you are familiar with, Vizana Hakim, who has joined us as a job share for Yvonne, so you may see emails from her, Lawrence Baker, who's our communications executive on the team, and Miriam Wahlberger, our head of public affairs. And then last but not least, we carry on with our programme of face-to-face meetings. As you know, many of you have had direct access to the experts in the business, such as Phil Hutchinson and his timetable team as part of the timetable consultation process, and we look to continue this in the future. So I'm going to hand over now to Stuart Cheshire, who will give an update from the route.
Good evening, everybody. Let's see if we can get to grips with this technology. There was a few little bits and pieces about echoes on the microphone, so I've just moved it a little bit. So if it's not suitable, just type through that it's not suitable, and we'll see if we can do something about it. Right. Okay. I'm guessing that most of you will want to know stuff that's going on with regards to the timetable. So we'll keep the route update fairly brief and give you an opportunity to ask some questions, and then we'll get Phil Hutchinson, who most of you know, to talk to you about the timetable stuff. So from my piece, apologies I didn't get to see you all face to face today, but clearly the weather's played a big part in that. So let's have a look. So as we move through towards May, we're probably about 2/3 of the way through our modernisation programme now, and over the next few months, you'll find that Rail Plan 2020, which is going to replace the headline of Thameslink programme, will play a bigger part in our lives. So keep your ears and your eyes open for Rail Plan 2020, but Rail Plan 2020 really outlines the roadmap of where we're going in our modernisation programme between now and the end of the franchise. So watch out for that on all of the channels that Kath's already described, and we'll see where we get to. A little bit more about that as we go through anyway. Just an update on the timetable consultation. It's been a huge effort by Phil and the team, and a massive thank you from me for what they've done. And what I hope you'll all appreciate is that the consultation process has been very real. This, you hear me say over and over again, but this is the biggest change in timetabling terms ever. And it's a once in a lifetime, once in a generation opportunity, never to be repeated. So it's absolutely fundamental that the guys got this as right as they possibly could. A blank piece of paper, which has never happened before, a daunting task, and a task that they've taken to wholeheartedly, and from my point of view, certainly produced an output that is the best they possibly could with everyone's input. Now that input has meant over 28,000 responses to consultation, and it's also meant a massive change to what they've already done. So they've had over 100 changes to the timetable based on what's been said, and even a minor change can result in a whole recasting of massive portions of the timetable. So it's not a simple thing. It's taken a team of people, and I think me, along with others in the industry, are really grateful for what we've come up with. There are winners and losers in the process, and what we're hoping clearly is that there are going to be more winners than there are losers. But more of that from Phil, I think, as we get through the evening with the technology. I did check today. If you look in Rail Planner, you will see that May the 21st, which is the day after the timetable change, is now represented. So I did check what my journeys were going to be like this morning, and they're in there. So if you do want to look online through National Rail Inquiries, you will see that the May 18 timetable now is beginning to be uploaded, and the GTR element will be the first to be uploaded, which is good. Monumental step in the industry happened on Monday. It all happened very quietly and very successfully, I can report. It's the first time ever that the East Coast Main Line has been linked in passenger service to the Midland Main Line, and the 09, I'm looking at my train planners here, the 0946 from Peterborough to Horsham departed on time and arrived on time, and it came through the canal tunnels with a whole load of railway journalists on board and a whole load of paying passengers, and it transferred across just south of Finsbury into St Pancras and then onto the south through London Bridge using Thameslink dedicated platforms at London Bridge, I might add. Fantastic achievement. Years in the making and quite costly too. So a £7 billion investment that's not finished yet. That has meant a whole load of new infrastructure, a whole load of new trains, and the first evidence of that was the running of that train on Monday. So a fantastic achievement and a great big thank you again from me for everybody involved in that. So what's been going on? Again, a big thank you from me, but this time to you guys. The results from the latest publication of the National Rail Passenger Survey puts Thameslink up a massive 10%. And I think that's testament to two things. Us working with the train supplier to eventually get a train that is now as reliable as the trainer it was replacing. So those of you who use the Class 700 services regularly on Thameslink will know that train breakdowns are now becoming less frequent than they were. And I can report that the January figures released by the industry suggest that the Class 700 is now at least as reliable and in some cases more reliable than the Class 387 that it replaced. That has meant, along with changes to our processes, modernisation of the way that we work and introduction of different control principles, that Thameslink performance is at an all-time high. And that is represented by your feelings, I think, in the National Rail Passenger Survey. And you can see from the numbers there that we're quite pleased with our achievement. And I think amongst London commuter operators, we're joint first, which is absolutely fantastic. Oh, excuse me. The results on Great Northern were static. Now, that doesn't surprise me. And I'll tell you for why. The team that look after Great Northern are exactly the same team that look after Thameslink. But the process on Great Northern is lagging Thameslink, the modernisation process that is, by about 18 months. So whilst we had a whole load of new fleet, a whole load of driver training to cope with, and all of the other stuff that goes with the modernisation process that we've gone through on Thameslink, Great Northern is lagging in that process by about 18 months. It will catch up, and it will catch up later this year in a big way when you'll start to see the very old trains on the GN inners being replaced by brand new Class 717s. So that is the oldest trains on the UK network being replaced by the newest. And that will then bring, at the end of the Class 717 introduction, that will then bring Great Northern in line with Thameslink in terms of the modernisation process. And that should be complete sometime in 2019. For Great Northern customers who use the Northern City Line frequently, my apologies for recent cold weather issues that we're working through with the infrastructure provider Network Rail. But we are trying to introduce the new fleet sooner. We are so pleased with the current serviceability of the Class 700 stock that we're working with Siemens at the moment to see whether we can get the Class 700s in a little bit sooner than anticipated. And if we do, maybe we'll start to see them appearing in August of this year, and that'll be great. Yeah, and here we are. Graphically, you can see that on that slide that this is a graphical presentation of current Thameslink performance. The blue bars are this year. Now, a couple of highlights, really. You'll see in previous years, which are the pink and the blue lines, through the autumn, train performance has dropped off dramatically. Now, this year, you can see that it didn't. And that is testament, I think, to the way that the Class 700 behaves through the autumn period. And for the technophobes amongst you, the braking system on the Class 700 allows the wheels to clean themselves more regularly than the Class 387 or the old Class 319s, which meant that its autumn performance and its autumn braking has largely been unaffected by leaf fall. So that's good. What I will say though, we've had some problems highlighted in the last couple of days with the DOO system and the snowfall, but we'll work very quickly with Siemens to put that right. So Thameslink performance I'm satisfied with. Delay attribution is where we want it. It should be about 2/3, 1/3 Network Rail go via Thameslink Railway, which it is. So we're fairly comfortable with that. And we do get, for regular users of the Midland Main Line, we do get a tremendous service from Network Rail Derby, who look after us, and I'm really pleased with their input too. Great Northern, slightly different story, but this is largely driven by two things. Firstly, they haven't got new rolling stock, or they didn't have it in place for this autumn. We will have a lot more in place for next year. The driver recruitment process on Great Northern is lagging that of Thameslink, so we are playing catch up on Great Northern with driver numbers, and there's an awful lot of new rolling stock learning that's going on. So where customers on Thameslink were disadvantaged by the driver training for Class 700 12 months ago, the Great Northern passenger is being disadvantaged for driver training right now. We're also releasing a whole host and great big clusters of drivers, about 50 a day at the moment, to learn new routes as we move into the new timetable, and all that plays its part in affecting Great Northern performance. Mostly though, it's the old rolling stock and the poor performance of the Network Rail infrastructure, and we'll work through that. We'll work through that with the new timetable, and we'll work through that with the introduction of the new fleet, and our driver numbers will be where they should be by the time we get to May timetable introduction. So again, I'm really pleased with Thameslink. Great Northern, we understand, slightly lagging Thameslink in its modernisation profile, but it's on track, and I've kept my promises so far, so I'm going to make another one. Great Northern will be okay in about 6 months' time, so bear with us. I don't think things are horrendous at the moment, but they could be better, and we'll make them better as we go through the next 6 months. Again, delay attribution about right. You'll see there that there's a big purple chunk in the 7 o'clock position on the slide, and that's the effect that the East Coast Main Line and Virgin trains has with the interactions with their late arrivals on our patch interacting with our trains, and again, that's the old timetable probably not working as efficiently as it could, and we're fairly hopeful the introduction of the new timetable in May 18 will get rid of that interaction and give us an uplift in Great Northern performance, certainly on the East Coast, and that's a little bit of the timetable that we must get right, because the what happened on Monday with the linking of the East Coast Main Line to the Midland Main Line will mean that if we don't get the stuff right on the East Coast, we're going to transfer any delay straight onto the south of England. So we need to be very careful about that and make sure that what we've planned is accurate and loaded with resilience. Ticket machine update. My apologies to our customers over the last 6 months. The introduction of the new ticket machine hasn't been as smooth as it could have been, and that's largely down to our German suppliers not behaving themselves. The ticket machines have been through a huge uplift in reliability in the last 6 or 8 weeks. That slide's slightly out of date. The last set of figures suggests that the ticket machines at the moment are around about 96% reliable. The contractual position is that the Scheid and Bachmann, the supplier, should be providing about 98%, and we're working with them to close down that last 2%. But certainly I've noticed at my local station a massive uplift in ticket machine serviceability over the last months. Kego grows in popularity. Grows across the network in its functionality, and I'm not going to say too much about Kego other than that we're working with the provider to make sure it's loaded with the products and the flexibility that you guys are asking for. I recognise the fact that it wasn't up to much when it came in to operation a couple of years ago, but we've worked with a supplier on the basis of what you guys have said to make it a viable product, and we'll continue to do so. This is what you can see now is a pictorial representation of our journey that we've all been on, and I include you in that. You'll see that we're about 2/3 of the way through the snake there, with May 18 rapidly approaching. Now that's for all of the good reasons that I've spoken about already. May 18 is a nervous time for us, so we'll be looking for a plan to introduce the timetable, which is graduated over a week or so either side of the Big Bang date, so that we can get drivers in the right place, we can get trains in the right place, and we can get awareness of the timetable in the right place, all of which needs to be done to make it a success. It's not an easy task. Let me just give you an outline. We introduced 6 new trains onto the Great Northern 2 weeks ago, and that in itself took 7 days of work and about 30 empty carriage stock moves that happened through the night that you would have been unaware of. So when we completely recast the timetable in May, you can understand what a massive issue that's going to be. And it's a bit of a leap of faith, a leap into the unknown for all of us, and it does carry risk. And if I look back over history, something similar, which was the recasting of the West Coast mainline timetable, took some time to bed in. Now we think that we've learned our lessons from what happened on West Coast, but certainly I'm absolutely convinced there are parts of the process that we don't fully understand and we're not aware of, and there will be a few hiccups. New signallers will need to learn how to signal the new timetable. Drivers will have to learn their new routes, and until the whole system of people becomes familiar with the May 18 product, it won't run as efficiently as it should. That doesn't mean it's broken, it just means that it'll go through a running in phase, and when that running in phase is over, I'm sure everything will be fantastic. How long that running in phase is will depend on the people involved and the leadership, of course, which we play a great part in. So I think that's the end of my route update, and I'm sorry we couldn't see each other face to face and enjoy our normal interaction, but I hope I've been as informative as the technology will allow, and I think we're going to open it up to some questions. So I think if you've got a question, type away, and I'll rely on the team around me to point in the right direction, and I'll see if I can answer them. So stand by. Okay, so I think you should be able to hear me. You're not going to see me through this phase, so I think that's a blessing. So the question is from Stephen Rolfe. What is the current Thameslink situation for the second person on trains? And he quotes passenger host when Thameslink services replace Southern services at unstaffed stations. Well, the answer to that is that the position with regard to passenger assistance in terms of our less abled passenger offering won't change. It'll be different at different locations. Whether we choose to put a second person on the train or whether we choose to man the unmanned station will depend on the locality and the situation of the unstaffed station. But what I can promise you is that the situation with regard to help from a second person won't change. Okay, I wasn't sure whether I was live or not then, so apologies if there was any confusion. So the next question is from Chris Smith, and it's a question that's really important, and it says, can you give any view on when there will be a facility to buy tickets starting from other stations? Important to Londoners who want to buy a ticket starting at the Zone 6 boundary. Chris, this is really important to us too, as you know, and we are working closely with our key card supplier to make that so. Now, I can't give you a view on when there's going to be an output. What I can give you a view on is the urgency and importance that we're applying to it, which is immediate and right now. So I'm hoping that certainly as we move towards the May 18 timetable, we'll be in a position to offer a more comprehensive offering as far as Kigo is concerned, and it will include exactly what you asked for. Next one is a question from Mike Guerra, who says, with respect to current weekend engineering works, there are no clear posters showing which days are affected. At least under Wagon, we had clear signs on the ticket machine at the approaches to the platforms, right at the top of the stairs, along with the signs with directions to the bus stops and times of the replacement bus services, etc., etc. What I can say, Mike, is that there will be some more posters. There have been some posters issued, and apologies if they're not fit for purpose. There will be a whole load more issued in the next 24 hours. So you should be seeing the information that you want appearing very quickly. If you don't, let a member of the customer services staff know, or let us know, and we'll make sure that we respond to that request, because that's really, really important. Next question is about Stevenage Turnback, which is a very, very subject close to my heart. It's from Kay Mead at East Herts Council. Kay, you'll be kept informed by our stakeholder team, but I can give you a little bit of information that the current proposition regarding the turnback is 2020, and the Secretary of State has put a bit of pressure on Network Rail for them to deliver by that date, and absolutely no, it won't be impacted by the works at Stevenage on a more general basis. It's a standalone project and absolutely necessary for you and us, and we'll keep pressure on the Secretary of State to keep Network Rail to their promises. So rest assured that you'll be kept updated through our stakeholder team, but 2020 is the current date, and if anything, we would want that sooner. Next question's from Francesca, who says it's good to hear that Great Northern Moorgate Services might get new trains by August instead of December. However, the current publicity states that they are imminent, and I think that I'd agree with that, Francesca. The current Rail Plan 2020 posters does talk about new trains, but it's referring to the Class 387s and the Class 700s. We need to change that. I think there's a bit ambiguity there that we need to sort out. Please also bear in mind that the bringing forward of the Class 717 at this moment in time is aspirational, and we're working with our suppliers, train planners and everybody else, including Network Rail, to make sure that that's possible. But to be secure in your expectation that autumn is the current date for the 717s, and if it happens before then, that's fantastic. What I'm going to try and do now is just wrap up a couple of questions from Kay Mead and Ollie Jacob, and thank you, Ollie, for suggesting that the webcast is excellent. I'm presuming that's the radio element and not the live broadcast element. So the questions around Oyster and the extension of Oyster. Now, whilst we work on your behalf to try and make Oyster extension possible, it's ultimately in the hands of the Department for Transport. So I would encourage our use to lobby for you, but I would also encourage our use to make sure that we point you in the right direction to do your own lobbying with inside of the department, so that there's a double action effectively on getting the Oyster boundaries extended. I think the Oyster boundary being extended helps us and helps you, but for reasons that I think you're all aware of, it's not entirely fruitful for the department. So it does need a whole load of political lobbying external to GTR to make that happen, and we'd be more than happy to work with anybody who wants to work with us to put pressure on the DFT to extend Oyster boundaries. But ultimately, it's a TfL DFT decision. TfL with regard to technology, DFT for paying for that technology, and the loss of revenue that they would then suffer because of the extension of the oyster boundary and not taking mainline ticket revenue through our fare box. So it's a touchy subject as far as the department are concerned, but we can certainly help you through that and help you with the key people inside of the Department for Transport. I feel a bit like a radio DJ. Next question's Arthur from Bedford, who I know very well. So good evening, Arthur. He asks, what is the current mileage per casualty for the Class 700? Now, let's just be a little bit careful with miles per casualty in Class 700s. When we talk about miles per casualty on a 319 or a Class 387, we're talking about a 4-car unit. When we're talking about miles per casualty on a Class 700, just remember it's a fixed formation and it's either an 8-car or 12-car. So it's the equivalent of 2 319s or 3 319s or 2 387s or 3 387s banged together. So when we suggest that a Class 387, it was 30,000 miles between failures, when you put 3 of them together, that amounts to 7,500 miles between failures because the reliability halves every time you bang them together. The current miles per casualty for a fixed formation Class 700 went over 10,000 miles for the first time ever in January. So that puts it slightly better than an equivalent Class 387 12-car. So testament to the software engineers at Siemens and testament to the people who are using it. That's not the actual reliability in service at the moment is not my biggest concern with the Class 700s. My biggest concern with the Class 700s is having enough trains at the start of the day. So it's a different problem and it's more of a capacity problem now for Siemens than a capability problem for the train. But things are improving and there's more software updates very shortly. I'm slightly nervous with the Class 700 in that we have never run it in automatic train operation or using the ETS signalling system before, which we will do in May. We don't necessarily need it to operate train service, but we do need it to train our drivers. So we will be running an automatic train operation and we will be using the new signalling system between May and January when we will need it. The trains have never operated in that mode before, so I'm expecting some different failure modes to manifest themselves. But as I've said already, I think Siemens have been pretty fast to react to anything that we've thrown their way so far. And I'm anticipating that should ETS or HO problems occur, then they'll be able to fix them fairly quickly. And we've got an 8-month window to sort any issues out that we might have. So different set of problems now, and I suppose nice problems to have in that the train's as reliable now as we could have expected at this time in its life cycle. Just a shame it took such a long time to get it to that point. Next question is from Trevor Mason. So it's been suggested that all stations have a notice on when the street lighting is turned off for those travelling on late trains. Would GTR consider this at their stations? The answer is yes. I'm not quite sure where we get our information to be accurate because most street lighting I know of adjusts itself as the hours of darkness change. So let's work with you on that one, Trevor, and see if you can drop Kath a note and be a bit more specific about what you're asking for and where, and we'll see what we can do. But I've got absolutely no problem in liaising with the local authority and making sure that our passengers are getting as much information as they possibly can. I've got a question here which is a very live question, I think, and pertinent. Let me read it out. Do you think there is any possibility of providing perhaps just a small number of more comfortable seats in the Class 700s? Perhaps just in the 12-car units that are used for long distance services. People commuting on a long way do complain bitterly about the lack of seat comfort. John, I can confirm that people do complain about the lack of comfort on long distances because my wife is one of them. issue regarding the seat on the Class 700 is that when the train was specified, there were a very limited number of seats that fitted the specification of what was being specified, and none of them were comfortable. So this was the best seat available at the time, and you'll understand that the procurement process for the Class 700s is quite a long one, so that the options now, if we were building a new train right now, would be different. Unfortunately, they're not. I think that's a very long answer to no chance, because if we did that, it would be very expensive, and it wouldn't stack up in terms of a business case. Just for clarity, that the 8-car units also run full length of route as well as the 12-car units, so it would be very difficult, I think, to just fit a limited number of comfy seats and isolate them for long distance travellers. You can imagine the carnage that would ensue at Bedford of fighting over the comfy seats, the dozen or so that were fitted first thing in the morning. So we've got time for one more question, and then we'll hand over to the timetable bit of the webinar. So let's see if we can pick out a juicy one. Final question, which I think is another question that is really an issue that has risen out of the creation of the GTR franchise, if you like. Now, just a reminder of why GTR was put together in the first place. GTR, you will know, is made up of TLGN, which is the old FCC footprint, Gatwick Express and Southern. Now, those train operators were brought together in one super franchise to take away any competition in the timetable, as the train planners tried to build a timetable and bid for pass-through with Network Rail to make your life a lot easier post May 18. Now, that competition internally clearly doesn't exist, but when the train companies were brought together, they brought together with them a whole load of different terms and conditions with regard to ticketing and fares. So now that Thameslink are running over southern routes and a whole load of different routes that they've never done before, where other operators have operated in the past, there's a whole load of ticketing funnies that have come out of the woodwork. It all needs looking at. Some of it is being looked at, and as it does materialise, we are paying attention to it and listening to what you say. That there are clearly some issues that are unfair. There are some issues that have manifested themselves for the very first time, all of which need to be wrapped up in a sort of a ticketing study that's currently underway, that will make sure our stakeholder management team keep you aware of. All I want to say is we're not ignoring the issue, and there is a rationalisation process and a ticketing funnies put right process that's happening right now. So I'll wrap up there from my perspective. Hastened along by S. Duckett, who says, can we move on to the timetable section? Well, yes, Mr. Duckett, we certainly can. So I'll just switch off, hand over the technology to Phil Hutchinson, and then there'll be a break in proceedings of less than a few seconds while Phil moves into the hot seat and we get on with the timetable bit.
Right, good evening, everybody. My name is Phil Hutchinson, the Head of Strategic Planning for GTR. What we're going to talk about in this section now is the timetable. We'll do a brief summary of where we're at in that process, and then we've got plenty of time at the end for questions, and we've got the team here as well, so Peter Lane, Charles Salter and Jane Cobb here, who were able to answer any questions live as we go through. Apologies, I do have a little bit of a cough, so if I have to break for a couple of minutes, then I do apologise for that as well. So at the very start of this process, GTR franchise started in September 2014, and in July 2015, the Southern and Gatwick Express elements joined our franchise. At that point, the strategic planning team was formed. The strategic planning team was designed to deliver and develop our timetable for 2018. And we have I feel we have some of the best in the industry working in this team who've been working on complex timetables for many years, and we've been able to bring together 4 different regions across the route, as Stuart said earlier, a very complex task in terms of drawing together all the different routes and building a timetable with multiple different operators, as well as many different needs. One of the very first things we said as a team is that we're radically changing the timetable. We need to share all of that, the thoughts and the thinking around that. And to do that properly, we needed to start a consultation really early to ensure that all of our thinking was shared and agreed, and we heard back from people like yourselves. Thank you very much for those of you who've taken part in our consultation phases. We've made ourselves available to as many of you as we can, and visited something in the region of 160 different groups, met on multiple occasions, and the end result has been an improvement on where we started, and I think most people can say that we have improved the service offering as a result of that. Phase 1 of that consultation started in September 2016. That covered the routes, the calling patterns, the frequencies. There was some quite significant changes planned from the original Thameslink network, and it was really important that those were shared, such as new routes into Kent instead of Caterham and Tattenham Corner, as well as alternative services on the Great Northern and Southern routes as well. Armed with all of that in mind, and all that data that we undertook on that 3-month consultation, the team got to work on the detailed timetable, which was shared in phase 2. This was a slightly later start and shorter due to the general election in June of 2016, but nevertheless that generated 10,000 responses, which was a phenomenal amount in regard to the feedback when we talked to people like Passenger Focus and Transport for London and London Travel Watch. Phase 3, we covered the weekends, and all of that feedback, particularly on all 3 phases, is now on Rail Plan 2020. And of course, our day 1 of the timetable, first day, is Sunday the 20th of May, but that's the first phase of what will be 4 phases of the rollout of the timetable. Consultation, excuse me, the consultation certainly doesn't end there. We want to review over the next few years how the timetable is, and keep the service keep service improvements throughout our network coming. So we've covered these in previous forums before, but this timetable that we've embarked upon is a complete redesign, a complete blank sheet of paper approach, something that was never possible before. One of the reasons why GTR was formed was to deliver the Thameslink programme, deliver the new trains, and deliver a new timetable. It would be incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to rewrite the timetable on the Brighton Main Line in particular, unless there was one operator in place to do that. In terms of our service, the timetable itself has gone through a radical overhaul, in the sense of looking at the running times, looking at how we resource trains, so many self-contained routes. We're introducing new train crew depots at numerous locations around our network. Those are all designed to make sure that the timetable delivery is as the best it can be, and placing our train crew where our new stabling sites are is an important feature in that. Equally important is separating out the Great Northern Main Line and Metro routes, so that there's no any delays or incidents that occur off the route doesn't immediately impact through reactionary delay. And the same is said on our southern network, where we're creating a separate Metro, Main Line and coastal routes, and the same for our Thameslink network. With the expanded Thameslink network, they will operate by dedicated resources in terms of trains and train crew throughout the day. Passenger numbers throughout our network have doubled in the last 12 years on Southern, and in the last 16 years on Thameslink and Great Northern, and that is a phenomenal amount. And when you think the timetable currently operated originates from largely the 1990s and has been built over different layers over different times. We've had to take a view of reviewing all of that, and part of our timetable is creating realistic running times through station calling times, which is the dwell time. So a number of stations will go up, allow passengers more time to get on and off the train, and that reflects the reality that is there today. Oh, what is seen today. What happens today is various amounts of timetable, what I call timetable creep. So as the trains get closer to London, carrying more and more passengers, the timetable ultimately becomes minor delays occur, and that escalates through. So phasing, we've talked about this previously, but we will cover that now, and that is why we're doing it. It's to bed in the new technology, and then how we're doing that is introducing trains on a phase basis through the Thameslink routes 18, 20, 22 through series of timetable changes going forward. But the majority of changes on the southern network and the major changes to the May timetable occurs in May, and that's when 70% of the overall benefits are delivered at that time. Okay, so across the network, in terms of our consultation, there were a number of themes that came across. A few of those were, why are my journeys longer? Well, we've completely reviewed and rewritten the timetable to place in it more running time, reviewing the rules that the timetable are delivered off, and also the dwell times that are allocated at stations. That sometimes means journeys are timetabled to take slightly longer, but in most circumstances, what will be happening at the end of that is a much better, more resilient timetable that we're able to recover from the most minor delays where the current system can't. In terms of the consultation, we've had 28,000 responses to questions. So we've received a number of questions through that process. If your question is not necessarily listed, that doesn't mean it hasn't been actioned, or it doesn't mean we haven't listened. It means that we've pulled together as many as we can and grouped them together, and it may be that some of those are indeed covered in other aspects of our work. Equally, we ran the phase 3 consultation on the weekends, and that phase 3 weekends is for the May timetable at least, is an interim timetable where we will be looking to improve the offering much later. In May or going onwards, that will be the period when Network Rail will be delivering £300 million investment in the infrastructure that was granted to Network Rail by the government. The vast majority of that engineering works takes place between May 2018 and May 2019. So what we didn't want to do is introduce a whole load of new services at that point, where actually for the vast majority of weekends they wouldn't actually be able to operate. So we will be reviewing the Sunday timetable again in May 2019 and really taking on board much more of the detailed feedback that was given to us through phase 3 consultation. The next part was, when does the timetable you're consulting on start? Well, the answer to that is that it will be coming through in phases. The first phase being this May, second phase in December 2018, and then phase 3 May 19, phase 4 in December 19. At that point, it's a lot of services on the Thameslink network join throughout the routes. But equally, the vast majority of changes on the southern network start this May, and then the Great Northern Metro will ramp up partly in May, but also in a future date thereafter once all the new trains are in. So some key dates for you, which I think was covered before. What you will see now is the beginning of trains on the National Rail Inquiry's website. I would also say at this point that not all trains are in there at this moment in time. Network Rail have encountered some issues with releasing some of the trains. So if you're looking on some parts of your network or your station, don't be alarmed. It does mean that some trains are not necessarily there at this moment in time. The ramp up of information coming out will be doing so through March and April in advance of the change. Also we'll be issuing some PDF timetables at some stage as well in the future, so you'll be able to see those going forward. What you will also see on Rail Plan 2020, again coming forward shortly, is a breakdown of each and every station that will feature in due course on that website. Okay, now we're going to do a route by route review of Thameslink and what's coming up and what we've been able to do, and we'll be pointing out the sort of things that have changed during consultation, and then we'll go straight into the question and answers. So in terms of Thameslink Metro, good news on the Catford Loop. We've been able to secure a very significant improvement on train services on that route. Originally, the train services were in our franchise were for 2 trains an hour all day, but through the consultation exercise and through the support of local rail users, we've been able to increase that service to 4 trains an hour all day. That's a new route between Luton and Orpington, and also between Welwyn Garden City and Sevenoaks. The 4 trains an hour services start from May 2018. However, all 4 trains will initially 2 trains an hour will finish at Blackfriars until May 19, when all 4 will continue through in the peak period after that. Also at this point is a new route between Luton and Rainham via Greenwich, and again that is a new route that came about through significant support from stakeholders along the North Kent line along there. Going on to the Thameslink main line, that is where the vast majority of our services are being expanded. So new routes all start this May, which is Horsham to Peterborough, East Grinstead to Bedford, Littlehampton to Bedford, and also the Cambridge to Brighton service. So that all of these services are now confirmed to be operating. Initially, the Cambridge to Brighton will be once an hour until December 2019, and then the full service of half-hourly services will begin. And as Stuart said, we're operating trial services at the moment, 1 train a day in each direction through the tunnel, and do try and use those if you can. In terms of the Thameslink mainline services, the journeys will be more realistic with performance time added to and from the core to ensure reliability. Of the new trains on the Class 700s, the vast majority will have tables and Wi-Fi fitted, and there is a programme to retrofit others. We're calling again at London Bridge. Certainly from May, all mainline trains will operate via London Bridge and with a reduced journey time. A lot of services at the moment are trialling. We're running services via London Bridge as we begin to start more services going through there. Again, for Radlett and Elstree and Boreham Wood, there is an increase in the frequency, off-peak frequency, to 6 trains an hour. That's a long-standing stakeholder request, and one that we're able to introduce from May 2018. Again, that is above and beyond our original franchise agreement. In terms of East Midlands trains and Thameslink, with regards to Bedford, Luton in the peak period, most of you may have heard by now that East Midlands trains have taken the decision to remove stops at Bedford and Luton on peak services. In their place, the DfT have instructed GTR, our Thameslink services, to operate a half-hourly fast service between Bedford, Luton, St Albans and St Pancras, with a journey time of 45 to 47 minutes. So we've been able to, we've been asked to revise our timetable on that basis. And we've been able to review the timetable with that in mind, and Network Rail have now agreed to the slots that they will operate. This situation will remain in place until at least December 2020, when additional line capacity north of Bedford, for tracking north of Bedford through to Kettering and electrification, which of course was due to be delivered by December 2017. So this is some 3 years later than planned, when those services will then have more new rolling stock on these Midlands trains, additional infrastructure, and also the ability to alter their slots around ours. There are slots for 8 trains an hour on these East Midlands trains on the fast lines that don't interact with the Thameslink services. It's north of Bedford where the issues are causing a problem for them with the current infrastructure, current rolling stock, and the current interaction with other services north of there. But what does that mean for our services? Well, we obviously will be picking up more passengers from Bedford and Luton. In order to do that, regrettably for that period of time, we're not able to fulfill the quantum train increase that we had expected to deliver in May 2018 at Flitwick, Leagarave and Harpenden, do apologise. So in the morning peak, I'm not going to go through line by line on here, but for Flitwick there's no change today in the morning peak. Leagrave, there's a slight reduction in the number of peak services, and again at Harpenden for the fast services in the morning peak. We currently operate a mix of 8 and 12 carriage trains. From May we'll be adding more 12-car trains to the plan. In terms of the evening peak, Flitwick was due to receive 18 and now will be 15. Leagrave's no change today in terms of 12, and then again we'll be allocating more 12 carriage trains in the evening peak period as well. Moving over to Great Northern, in terms of the Hertford Loop, significant improvements coming to this route from May 2018. The new trains are coming, but as you heard earlier, that will be during the course of the timetable change. However, what we are able to do on both the Hertford Loop and the Welwyn Garden City route is introduce more off-peak services of 4 trains an hour throughout the entire day, which is a significant increase over particularly on Saturdays there too. On Sundays that service frequency will follow. Initially that will be kept at 2 trains an hour, but it will increase to 4 in future timetable changes. The big news on this route is that the previously announced rail replacement bus service between Hertford North and Stevenage, and also serving Watton and Stone, will not need to be put in place until December 2018. That's due to the phasing of the Thameslink service and the reduction to hourly of the service between Brighton and Cambridge. Clearly, as we've always said throughout this rail replacement bus is necessary until Network Rail has delivered promised infrastructure at Stevenage in the form of a turnback bay and a separate line. We're working very closely with colleagues from Network Rail and the Department for Transport to really lobby and accelerate the delivery of that scheme. And as Stuart gave you the update earlier, that is the time that we'll be running this replacement bus is slowly reducing, and that is very obviously very welcome. In terms of peak services on this line, the peak services will remain at the same level as today until the new fleet of trains are delivered, and then we will introduce an increased peak service to and from the Hertford Loop and also the Welwyn route at a later stage. Over there's some particular notes there for Winchmore Hill, Bayford, and what the service changes are around those routes. For Grange Park, we had a meeting at Grange Park last Thursday. So whilst it's the same services for now, there is a campaign for more services there, and we're going to take a look at what we can do with regards to the spread of services at Winchmore Hill, Enfield Chase and Grange Park. And some of that actually is around the location of Grange Park and where it sits within the travel card zoning as well. Alexandra Palace to Moorgate. Peak services between between Welwyn Garden City and Moorgate will no longer call at Haringey and Hornsey. We offered that as a question in the consultation, and there was very little effect that people wrote in about. So that those services will be switched to be the Hertford Loop trains. And then from a later timetable stage in December 18, there will be an uplift in services there. For the Welwyn Garden City routes, again, benefits from new trains, also some Thameslink services serving some of the intermediate stations between Cambridge and Maidstone East from December 19, but until then they will be operating to and from King's Cross. Also in the peak periods as well will be some services between King's Cross and Welwyn Garden City that will begin in May 2018 and through May 2019 will be extended through the Thameslink core through to Sevenoaks. For Hadley Wood, confirming here again that the increase in off-peak services is being done with 4 trains an hour. Welwyn Green and Bookman's Park will reduce to 2 trains an hour, and that's purely based on passenger demand where numbers are low. However, we will be operating 4 trains an hour in the peak period and also around school times as well. In terms of Hitchin, Nebworth and Welwyn North, one of the things that came out of the consultation was the extended period for the services out between King's Cross and Baldock. So we're also pleased to say today that there will be an extended period of operation for these services, departing hourly at 1954, 2054 and 2154. And again, that's direct feedback from multiple users and stakeholders along the route, and a point that we've been able to take to the department to have their blessing on that. In terms of Stevenage, we've already discussed the bus service, but Stevenage will be plugged into the Thameslink network and receive an increased off-peak and peak frequency through to Thameslink with longer trains also. So vast increases in capacity on those services. Many trains go through to Gatwick Airport, Brighton, twice an hour, and then increasing to 4 times an hour later in the year. For Nebworth, one of the routes that came up on this part was that you'll have 3 trains to Gatwick and Horsham, and also through to Maidstone East eventually. However, until that time, the trains will operate to and from King's Cross, and also Nebworth will be served by fast trains to and from King's Cross on the Great Northern part of the network too. Peterborough to Stevenage section of the line, those will transfer over to Thameslink through to Gatwick and Horsham, supplemented in the peak period by faster peak services to and from King's Cross also on the Great Northern route. It's worth also saying for that particular part, the Peterborough Stevenage section will become semi-fast trains between Stevenage and Finsbury Park. Passengers who travel to Welwyn Garden City, Potters Bar will need to change trains at Stevenage. For the Kings Lynn to Cambridge section of line, news here that we're still working very closely with Network Rail on delivering the 8 carriage trains, which is due during 2019. It's a very much needed project, which we're really working closely with our industry partners to ensure that is delivered. Until that time, we will still be dividing trains at Cambridge. We're running trains twice an hour to and from Cambridge, with one an hour going onwards to Kings Lynn and 1 an hour going on to Ely. Equally, the Cambridge to Brighton service will be introduced with a journey time to Gatwick of under 2 hours, and then eventually extended services to Maidstone East as well. For Royston, Letchworth, Baldock and the villages, we've spent quite a bit of time with the Royston and Letchworth user groups on that line, who initially had some concerns over the timetable and how it could be best fit best fits for the users of those lines and stations. So we've made some alterations to a number of trains on that route, restoring some services through to Letchworth and Royston, with some starting trains from there as well. And pleased to say that we've done the best we can at this stage, and there's still some further changes to make through December and onwards from there as well. So what I want to do now is hand over to yourselves to ask as many questions as you would like, and we'll do our best to get through the vast majority of them. As I said, most of the planning team are here to answer any specific questions. We'll do our best to get through them. Thank you very much. Right, hello again, it's Phil here. We have a number of repeated questions already about the timetable PDFs and when they will be available. So first of all, as I said, Network Rail have had some issues with the data downloads, and particularly into the National Rail website. However, what we will do from our site is produce some tables, timetables, and we will be setting those up within the next week or two, for 2 weeks rather, sorry, for PDFs, and we'll share that with all of you on here. It will take some time just to produce those tables to be distributed, but we will provide you with a full list from the data that we have. Right, we've had a question from Dave Cockle. Nice to see 4 trains an hour off-peak plan for the Hertford Loop Monday to Saturday from May. Can you assure me that there'll be sufficient drivers in the establishment by May to run this service, particularly on Saturdays? That's a very good question, and one that we often get asked. We've been recruiting a number of drivers now for a long period of time. That is showing fruits of that work. We now are actually training 50 drivers a day on the expanded Thameslink network and routes around London Bridge, and a lot of those are Great Northern drivers who are learning routes south of the river. We're doing that using the significantly more drivers than we need to run the service, and so it's having no impact on the service. So the answer is yes, we will have sufficient drivers. We have in fact, Great Northern is in very good shape in terms of drivers and ready to be trained on Class 717s, as well as delivering the new services from there. And that is also the same for the Thameslink route. However, what is going to happen over the next few months is drivers learning routes south, and our southern drivers learning routes north, and we're doing that in a controlled manner that is not currently having a problem causing an effect on the current timetable operation. Okay, so we've had a question from Roger Johnson in Sevenoaks. Why was the Maidstone East route put last in the priority list of Thameslink services? Who will decide whether the core is working? What will happen for Maidstone East passengers if in December 19, whoever decides they cannot start is the question. The answer to that is that we looked at various options based on a number of different factors, and the options that we looked at were far and wide. It's not whoever was, it wasn't by choice that it was last, but we had to take into a number of factors. One of which was we wanted to ensure that the passengers or routes that currently enjoy a Thameslink service will continue to do so without gaps in services. So we're not taking away. One of the options was to potentially terminate Wimbledon Loop services at Blackfriars, which clearly would have caused a very significant impact for passengers on that line. Or equally, or Catford Loop services terminating at Blackfriars, or looking at the other way, how do we phase trains in on different routes? We had to, with the news of the East Midlands trains, we had to prioritise all trains that came from the Midlands route to provide the capacity on that line as well. Equally, when we looked at other capacity schemes around the network, the Rainham Medway Towns route, the introduction of that would deliver a cascade of rolling stock on Southeastern that would benefit more more passengers in Kent as well, and if that service wasn't there, then that wouldn't have been able to operate either. Equally, Catford Loop line, the increase in services on that route, we'd looked at whether that was a route that was put back a little bit, but again, the sheer number of people using that service and operating it was is very much needed now. And that left the Maidstone East service, which is an overlay service of what's currently operated by South Eastern, and equally Maidstone currently has a service between Maidstone East and Blackfriars, currently operated by South Eastern, and that route as well has also benefited from a cascade of units from the Thameslink network. So a lot of trains on that line now are longer 8 carriage trains operated by Electrostar services. So in the main, we had to prioritise, and we felt that this order provided the best means of capacity. So we've had a question from Mike. Please confirm the time of the first King's Cross arrival from King's Lynn. Please confirm the connection of the Greater Anglia train from King's Lynn to permit arrival into King's Cross between 0700 and 7:10 at King's Cross will be restored. This was destroyed last year. So the first arrival into King's Cross will be the 4:43 from King's Lynn, which will arrive King's Cross at 6:32. We have tried numerous attempts to work with Greater Anglia to provide the connection from that route. However, unfortunately, Greater Anglia are unwilling to retime that service, and therefore at this time that is not a connecting train, which we know will be not great news for the line, but it's not through the want of us trying to work with Greater Anglia to resolve. I suggest that any further comments that you wish to make about that, I would direct them to colleagues within Abellio Greater Anglia. So we've had a question from Mike regarding Brookman's Park. I'll paraphrase the question. It's about what is the principal reason for the 2 trains an hour? Is it to save employment of 1 to 2 drivers in the off-peak? The answer is it doesn't save any drivers at all. It's not about saving drivers. It is purely about ensuring resilience in the timetable, and it's also matching passenger demand. The passenger demand for those stations is very, very low, and therefore it needs to be we're altering our timetable to match that demand throughout the day. That means the same frequency for Saturdays and Sunday as today. It's a slight reduction from a 20-minute frequency on Mondays to Fridays down to every 30 minutes. However, in the peak period, we have maintained the 4 trains an hour and also protected school time trains as well. So another question now from Michael from the Crofton Park users. Phil, we're hugely grateful for the uplift in services to the Catford Loop. Huge thanks to you, Jane, and the team. From May 2018, is there any chance our services can go through the core? We know this isn't the eventual plan, but it would be a huge boost if this could happen from May, as we know that there are other services that will run through the core from May too. So the answer to that is that there will be 2 trains an hour to and from Orpington that will be running through the core through to Luton in the peak period and Kentish Town in the off-peak period. We will be running clearly the 4 trains an hour throughout the entire day, but the phasing does mean that we're not in the position at this moment in time to increase the services beyond Blackfriars for the Sevenoaks services. However, with a change of platform at Blackfriars, there is a train within minutes of another which will perform a greater in connection and beyond that as well. Thanks for your comments regarding the uplift in services. Right, question from Francesca Kane regarding the Great Northern Metro implementation. Thanks to Phil and the team for all their consultation. How can we find out exactly what services are due to come in and when, if the National Rail Inquiries is currently unreliable? And likewise, what will the impact of weekend working be up until May 2019? We need to have precise info to brief our members and local travellers. And also a supplementary question regarding replacement buses. It's very helpful. It's very helpful to have just obtained an addition off at Cockfosters Tube to remove the need to travel by bus through town to and from Alexandra Palace. There's way too little publicity about it, so I'll take those two questions separate. Right, first question. The information in regards to NRE, it's some services that are not currently available, so it's not all. It's a small number of trains. We've issued something in the region of 11,000 schedules. I'm led to believe it's about 1,000 that are not there right the way through our network. So it's not just on Great Northern, not Thameslink, it's Southern. It's just bits and pieces around it. That information will be coming available within a matter of days from there, so hold fire with that. And in terms of the services on the Welwyn Garden City route, from May 2019, it's 4 trains an hour on Saturdays and Sundays, so the full uplift in services on the weekends is applying from May 2018 on that part of the network. In terms of the question about the ticketing arrangements on rail replacement buses on weekends, clearly I think this is one of the points that was raised earlier about the publicity on the posters. Some new posters are coming out imminently within the next day or so. That will have all the information on it, but yes, that sort of thing should be there. All right, question from Edward Carter. When you say the weekend timetable has been delayed, does that mean the timetable will not be the one published last summer with no changes as opposed to the current timetable? There was an undertaking to restore the fast evening services back to Letchworth and Royston on Saturday evening from May 2018. Will this now be delayed? The answer to that is no. There will be no delay to that element of the plan. Letchworth and Royston will have stops in the fast services from May 2018. In terms of what I mean by these Sunday services, and in particular, is the consultation that we ran for phase 3. There are some aspects of that timetable or feedback that we had that we've not been able to action, but we will be actioning that again and reviewing the weekends, particularly Sundays, from May 2019 onwards. But the vast majority of the timetables that were issued on for phase 3 consultation will be the ones that will be actioned from May. All right, so next question from Sarah Bartram. Will there be any direct trains at peak times from Ashwell and Morden to Cambridge North as there is now? The answer to that is yes, there will be. Up until December 2019. There is a new service coming in as part of the Abellio Greater Anglia franchise, whereby they'll be running longer fixed formation trains. They will be running the services to and from Cambridge North at a more frequent level than they do today. That means that the current Great Northern Thameslink services, which will become Thameslink from the villages, will only operate as far as Cambridge, and they will terminate there and return. So there is a service, but only until December 2019. Okay, question from Roger Smith. According to the NRE, the up Great Northern service from Baldock in the morning peak consists only of the 6:20 and the 08:20. Can you confirm the half-hourly service that we were led to expect as in the evening? This is a classic example of missing information from the National Rail Inquiries websites and the open train times, something we're urgently trying to resolve with our partners at Network Rail. There is a half-hourly service from Baldock in the peak period. They're just not displayed on the websites yet. So further question from Arthur. We are aware that some trains in both the AM and PM peak from Bedford will be 8 cars. Sorry, just lost the question there. Is it possible that travellers are told which trains are 8 and which are 12? before the new timetable starts. So we've been having a conversation within our publicity team. The likelihood is that we'll be actually reinstating the peak formations on the timetable, so everyone will be able to see and make an informed choice of which trains will be formed of 8 carriages and 12 carriages throughout the route, and that's for every part of our network, not just Thameslink. It will be the Thameslink Great Northern Metro, Great Northern, and the Southern routes as well, and that is particularly important when we're changing the service and changing the formations as well. So hopefully that is welcome news to all of you. So question from Tony Clay. So I missed part of the explanation of the last slide. Do I understand correctly that the Maidstone East services will be 1 train, initially introduced as 1 train an hour, or 2? It will be 2 trains an hour from the start of the timetable in December 2019. That's an extension of services between Cambridge and King's Cross. They'll be extended down to Maidstone East via the Thameslink Core and London Bridge. Okay, question from Neil Middleton. When are the Thameslink trains that go via London Bridge going to be advertised? So we are, as you're aware, we're currently running 32 trains a day via London Bridge. They're currently not advertised in advanced systems. They are being announced on the train where that is the case. And the reason for doing this is because we're undertaking quite a number of driver learning trips on that line, and we need to be assuring ourselves and indeed our passengers that the trains that we are running there will do so on a regular basis. That is happening more and more. The intention is that we start to advertise these trains within the next few weeks, as more and more drivers become aware of the route, and then equally from there we'll be running more than 32 trains, and it will grow progressively more all the way through until May. So we're doing it for consistency reasons, so that people don't get confused with the service. And I know that everybody's eager for trains to start and be advertised, and we'll be doing that as soon as we can. Okay, so question from Stephen Rolfe. As and when sorry, we've lost the question. Okay. As and when Brighton mainline capacity is increased at East Croydon Station and Wimble Bridge Junction, what passenger service improvements could you make for Southern and TL services on the Brighton mainline and Red Hill routes? So yes, you'll be aware that there are some plans by Network Rail to remodel the junction around East Croydon and Wimble Bridge Junction. That will bring about enhanced capacity and the ability to run more trains. I sit on a number of boards that discusses that, of which DFT also sit on. Clearly, the scheme beyond the delivery of that scheme sits beyond our current franchise, but please be assured that whilst it's beyond our franchise, we do take a view of that and also provide advice to the department and Network Rail as to how best that infrastructure could be used going forward. So in terms of which routes would benefit, there are clearly there are additional slots that will be created from that. It's entirely up to the Department for Transport to allocate that in terms of which route. I would strongly suspect, though, that the Red Hill route would be a major beneficiary of that, and indeed our timetable has been designed that way, in which eventually trains can be added to it, particularly how we've constructed the 10-minute gap frequency from Red Hill in this timetable in 2018. Okay, next question from Sarah Grove. From your slide on Royston, Letchworth, Baldock and Villages, please could you clarify the final point, faster services to King's Cross and Great Northern still working on share? So those slides were produced a little while back when that was still the case. We've now confirmed and been able to allocate some additional stops in services, so it was relating to some of the late night services. So we've now got an additional 2342 from King's Cross to Cambridge, which we'll now call it Letchworth and Royston, whereas previously that wasn't due to be the case. And also there's an additional train gone in the later morning peak, so it's a later arrival at King's Cross that's now an additional stop at Letchworth as well. So we were doing some final tweaks to the timetable, which we've now resolved. Okay, so question from Graham Feekins concerning changing between terminating and through platforms at Blackfriars. Must one always use the non-gated southern end mezzanine if cross-platform not possible, or can one use the northern gated end without ticketing charging issues, especially coming from the north, to transfer to a train starting and terminating platform? That is actually a good question. We will certainly. I believe that we certainly using the southern end is via the non-gated end. We will take that away and provide a response to you how that will work, particularly with the phasing bit. What we don't want to be doing is having people having to walk the length of a 12 carriage train if you're in the rear part of the train to go all the way down and back again, and we'll seek a solution to how best we can deal with that, and we'll answer that back. We'll come back to you and the rest of the group with that question. But that's a very good question, and thanks for raising that with us. Okay, so question from Sarah Bartram. I understand that Royston will continue to have a couple of trains, will continue to begin there as they do now. Will those trains also be stopping at Ashwell and Morden, so at least we have a chance of getting a seat during peak time? So those trains will not be calling at Ashwell and Morden. Ashwell and Morden will be served by trains from King's Lynn and also the trains between Cambridge and King's Cross, which are the more stopping services from there. So question from Michael from the Crosstern Park users. Once the 2018 timetable is in place, will passenger loading data from the Class 700s be used to directly inform future timetable plans in accordance with passenger loadings and passenger demands? So again, that's another fantastic question. We will. The way we've always said this, with the way people travel and use our trains and you travel around London, will change quite significantly over the next year or two, particularly with the opening of Crossrail, the Elizabeth line, how people use Farringdon and interchange with such trains. So we always use and review our timetables based on demand, but we'll also and that consists of a number of different themes. It's not just train loading, it's also ticket data and observed analysis as well. So yes, that we will always review our plans based on that, but I think in the next year or two, it's going to be interesting to see how demand settles down. I don't think we will be. I think we will need to take our time in reviewing that as well, and not make any rash decisions based on that, and certainly until all of our timetables in and the phased approach for Thameslink as well as the Crossrail services as well, and then we'll take a view with colleagues from the Department for Transport who specify services. Okay, so a question from Mike with regards to Brookman's Park. With respect to cancellations on the Welwyn route that serve Brookman's Park off peak, does that mean the next non-stop will actually stop at the two stations? The answer is that we will ensure that our plans, contingency plans, and when cancellations occur, that the next trains will stop to pick up passengers from those stations, so there will not be any lengthy gaps in service, and that's something that we will ensure, not just for stations like yourselves, but also the right mix of trains, or when decisions are taken around cancellations or any recovery from delays, that the passenger needs are put into the thinking of that as well. So further question from Francesca Kane. What about the impact of Network Rail engineering works at weekends? will there be actually any weekend trains at all before May 2019? So the point I raised about the spending of the 300 million investment fund that's been given to Network Rail by the government. The point I raised there was that the majority of the engineering works will take place between May 18 and May 19. That doesn't mean that every weekend will not have trains. It just means that there will be possessions that are taken, and those possessions are actually mainly on the south part of our route between Earlswood and Brighton. So that's where the vast majority of the investment is going in relay and track points, signal changes, Balcombe Tunnel, ballast cleaning, sleeper changes. That's where the majority of the works take place, and that is the route that will require the most amount of engineering works taking place on it. Those engineering works will take place outside of the summer period. Some will take place in the summer where a reduced line capacity takes place, but that doesn't mean across the network that we're replacing. There won't be any trains on for a significant length of time. It's when the engineering works are concentrated, and that will be over a number of weekends or ad hoc weekends as the work progresses. The case in point on that was the works on the Brighton line. We would have liked to have operated and still would like to operate a direct train between Cambridge and Brighton, but with the advent of those significant engineering works, the likelihood is that on the vast majority of weekends it was never likely to get to Brighton, therefore either having to terminate short or just not operate. So we took the decision to implement that when the vast majority of those engineering works are complete. So another further question from Roger Smith: if you make extra stops to cover cancellations, won't that impact presentation through the course? So what we will be doing on in regard to that is taking it on a case-by-case basis. Case-by-case basis being stations like Brookmans Park and Welland Green, where there is a lower service that compared with others, and taking the case whether we need to stop something additionally to not inconvenience passengers too greatly, but it will be done on a case-by-case basis as things develop. So question from Michael: Crofton Park users, has the 2018 timetable allowed you to be able to remove previous restrictions such as ghost paths on Thameslink routes, such as grandfather rights for train paths, ghost freight paths in frequently used paths, etc., or are there still restrictions in place that could harm future capacity? So that is a very good question. There are a number of routes on our network where there are Channel Tunnel freight trains. The Channel Tunnel freight trains are embedded in the timetable. They have to remain, and they still remain, and those cover parts of your route, such as the Crofton Park route, the Catford Loop, but also on the West London line. So one of the things that often gets asked is can we improve and increase services on our southern network between Watford Junction and through to Clapham Junction? Well, the reality is that with those paths in place, and be it whether they operate or not, they are in the timetable. We have to work around them, and we'll have to continue to do so because we are legally bound to. Those trains are in place, enshrined in law as part of the Railways Act of 1993, and that does mean that we need to plan our passenger trains around those strategic freight paths.
Hello again, everybody. So thank you so much for dialing in this evening. I hope that the webinar was a useful exercise in place of a face-to-face meeting, given the weather outside. Hopefully you found all of the presentations useful and interesting, and that Phil and his team in Stuart Cheshire answered as many questions as possible. I believe, having looked at all of the Q&As that we've had submitted, we had at least 80 questions that we've submitted and that we've answered. So hopefully that was really useful for you. We'd actually really appreciate your feedback on the webinar, as it's one of the first sessions that we've ran using this format. So any feedback that you could send to us on email, we have a team email address, which is gtr.stakeholders@gtrailway.com. That's gtr.stakeholders@gtrailway.com. If you can send any comments or feedback into that inbox, we can have a look at it and take your comments on board. The full presentation will be made available on the Stakeholder Extranet later this week, and we will send out an email with the link to that when it has been loaded up. Just in addition to the 2018 timetable, we will be running a webinar like this in June after implementation to take your feedback on the first sort of 5 to 6 weeks of implementation, to give you an opportunity to feedback to us directly once the timetable's been in place for a couple of weeks, just to go through any teething issues or feedback that you'd like to give us about it then. So again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you all again soon.